Imagine a world where the land is an untouched canvas, not yet carved by bustling mammals or shaded by towering oak canopies. Picture a planet where the air tastes a little thicker, seas whisper secrets along endless shallow shelves, and life is experimenting wildly with new ways to live. This is the Devonian, roughly 420 to 359 million years ago, a chapter of Earth's story that reads like a bold experiment in evolution. It's the period when the planet truly began to green, when water-breathing creatures learned the awkward poetry of limbs, and when the tapestry of life took vibrant, strange turns. Let's step back, slow down time, and walk the length of this period together, across seas, into swamps, and along the rocky coastlines of continents still forming. Through this journey, we'll meet armored fish that look like mobile tanks, forests that rewrite the rules of climate, and tiny pioneers that will change the fate of every future land animal. Start with the oceans. The Devonian seas were brimming with life in new and dramatic ways. Fishes diversified like never before. Jawless fishes that once dominated were gradually edged out by jawed champions, gnathostomes, that opened fresh ways to capture prey and dominate niches. Among them, placoderms, armored, bony fish with heads plated like medieval helmets, ruled many coastal and estuarine realms. Imagine them like living armored cars from a prehistoric parade, some built to swallow large prey, others to graze along the seabed. Alongside placoderms, early sharks and bony fishes were quietly improving their designs. Lobe-finned fish, with thicker muscular fins supported by bones, began to explore environments shallow and snagged by plant roots. Those fins would later be the scaffolding for something extraordinary, the precursors of limbs. The ancestors of tetrapods, creatures with 4 limbs, were not yet stumbling onto dry land as we picture amphibians today, but the evolutionary blueprints were being drafted in the shallows and lagoons. Above the seafloor, reefs grew into spectacular structures. But Devonian reefs were not always made the way modern reefs are. Some were built by massive microbial mats of cyanobacteria, the planet's original reef architects, while others were dominated by now extinct groups like stromatoporoids and tabulate corals. These reefs were living skyscrapers of carbonate, home to crinoids, brachiopods, trilobites, and a bustling cast of smaller animals. For a time, the world's shallow seas were reef cities, teeming with color, shape, and competition. Yet life was not only in the sea. The Devonian is often called the Age of Fishes, but it's equally the era of the greening continents, the time when plants moved beyond damp mats and fragile stalks into complex, rooted communities that would alter the planet forever. Early in the period, the land was dotted with small, simple plants, short, branching stalks crowned with spore-producing tips. But evolution is an impatient artist. Over a few dozen million years, these humble pioneers gave rise to roots and leaves, to woody tissue that let plants stand tall, and to vascular systems that let water and nutrients travel efficiently. Trees appeared, real forests with trunks, branches, and understories spread across floodplains and river valleys. One of the most remarkable plants of this time was Archaeopteris, a kind of woody, fern-like tree that combined features of modern trees and more primitive plants. It formed dense groves, shaded soils, and anchored sediments. Another group, the Lycopsids, built their own towering forms. These new forests didn't just decorate the land, they transformed it. By stabilizing soils, creating organic-rich sediments, and changing how water moved across the surface, they altered erosion patterns, sediment deposition, and even the chemistry of rivers and oceans. And that shift had a consequence as dramatic as anything in a blockbuster movie. A major atmospheric change. The spread of deep-rooted photosynthesizing plants acted as a vast carbon sink, drawing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and burying it underground in soils and sediments. Over millions of years, this gradual removal of greenhouse gas cooled the planet. Patterns of rainfall and ocean chemistry shifted. It's likely that these ecological changes set the stage for the great late Devonian extinction events. Pulses of global stress that dramatically reshaped marine ecosystems and closed chapters on many ancient lineages. On land, arthropods, the insects, spiders, millipedes, and their kin, had already been testing terrestrial life since the Silurian. In the Devonian, they diversified and flourished. Early myriapods crawled through the leaf litter, scorpions and mites carved out niches in the soil and under bark, and primitive hexapods were beginning to experiment with life beyond the water's edge. The land was still an open frontier, largely free of large herbivores, so plants grew with a kind of unchecked exuberance, creating the first real forests with complex, layered habitats. And then there are the first tentative steps toward truly walking on land. The fossil record gives us hints: lobe-finned fish with robust fin bones, trackways in shallow lagoon muds that suggest repeated excursions out of water. These were not yet fully terrestrial creatures. They still depended on watery environments for reproduction and much of their life cycles. But slowly, over millions of years, the skeletal and muscular changes accumulated. Fins grew stronger, joints formed, and lungs and air-breathing adaptations improved. The story of tetrapods and later amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals begins here in the Devonian's tidal pools and river shallows, with those first daring experiments in weight-bearing limbs. This was also a time of shifting continents. Gondwana, a giant southern landmass that would later become South America, Africa, Australia, Antarctica, and India, dominated the southern hemisphere. Laurussia, sometimes called Euramerica, formed from the collision of ancient blocks and drifted closer to the equator. Between and around these giants, smaller microcontinents and island arcs moved, collided, and reconfigured oceans. Sea levels were generally high, submerging large parts of continental shelves and providing rich habitats for marine life. At the same time, tectonic collisions built mountain ranges, the Acadian orogeny in what is today eastern North America and parts of Europe, and the early stirrings of the Variscan mountain building in Europe. But geological drama also brought environmental upheavals. Volcanic activity, the formation of extensive flood basalts in places like Siberia, and shifting ocean chemistry created stressors for many marine life forms. The late Devonian saw pulses of extinction, not a single cataclysm, but a series of declines that pared down reef-building organisms, wiped out many jawless fish, and drove trilobites to near extinction, leaving only a few survivors. Coral and sponge reefs collapsed in many regions, changing the pattern of life in shallow seas for millions of years. Through all of this, reefs rising and falling, continents colliding, forests spreading, the Devonian is defined by transformation. It's an era when life leapt into new possibilities. A spore on a damp bank spun into a root that anchored soil. A muscular fin propped against the muddy edge of a lagoon, and over ages became a limb. The planet's skin, its climate, and its ecosystems were rewritten by these innovations. There's something poetic about the Devonian. It's a story of firsts and of experiments, of lineages trying, failing, and sometimes succeeding in ways that would echo for hundreds of millions of years. It's the time when plants first built forests thick enough to cast deep shadows. It's when fish diversified into dizzying forms, some armored like knights and others sleek like the sharks we recognize today. It's when the blueprint for land animals, the tetrapod limb, was sketched in muscles and bone. For us today, the Devonian offers lessons. It shows how life and Earth's systems are entangled. The rise of forests influenced climate, the pulling of continents shifted ocean currents and habitats. A cascade of extinctions can follow even gradual environmental change. It reminds us that ecosystems are dynamic and that what seems permanent, a coral reef, a forested plain, a dominant group of animals, can be fragile in the face of large-scale shifts. But it also offers wonder. Imagine walking along a Devonian riverbank. Strange trees tower above, their roots knotting the soil. Dragonfly-like creatures, ancestors of insects, flutter through the air. In the shallows, chunky, armored fishes stir up sediment. And beyond, a reef rises from the clear, warm water like a living cliff. The air smells different, heavy with plant-produced oxygen and the distant tang of seawater. The world is younger, noisier, in the sense that evolution is experimenting on a grand scale, and the script of life is being rewritten. As our modern story plays out, the Devonian remains a powerful chapter to return to, a reminder of origins and of the slow, patient work of evolution reshaping Earth. From tiny spores to towering forests, from fin to limb, from microbial mat to reef metropolis, the Devonian is a time of creative upheaval. It's an ancient laboratory of life, an era where experimentation led to the ecosystems that would eventually support us. Take a moment to picture those deep time scenes. Continents striding together like slow dancers, reefs flexing their biological muscles, plants exploring the physics of height and shade, and animals discovering the geometry of limbs. That mind-bending time frame, tens of millions of years, is both humbling and uplifting. The Devonian asks us to think at the scale of eons, to recognize that the comfortable features of our world were once radical inventions. So next time you see a forest, a riverbank, or even a simple fish, remember the Devonian. Remember the age when life learned to reach, to anchor, and to breathe new air. Its stories are written in stone, in fossilized roots and armored skulls, in reef rubble and ancient trackways. They are a record of persistence, innovation, and the restless creativity of life itself. And if you ever want to wander back in time, there's no better guide than the Devonian, a dramatic, sometimes violent, always inventive era that set the stage for life on land and reshaped the oceans forever. Listen closely to its echoes, and you'll hear the footsteps of every creature that followed, from the first tentative limb shuffles in muddy shallows to the complex dance of life that covers the world today. Music softens, then fades.